Welcome, listeners. We have Sabrina Caluori with us today, and she brings a rare combination of marketing expertise, community building, executive coaching, and she is the Chief Marketing Officer um, at Chief. And she has spent her career helping women leaders and helping build culture defining brands. After leaving Paramount in 2024, Sabrina made a personal pivot to become a certified executive coach driven by her support for women executives. And that decision deepened her connection to the very challenges why Chief exists to solve isolation at the top, the need for trusted guidance, and the power of intentional community. So there she is, the CMO and executive coach, and brings a multi-dimensional perspective to the growing Chief brand. I'm excited to talk with you more, Sabrina.
Thank you for having me, Julie.
Of course, of course. So tell us, I mean, we got a little flavor of your backstory there, but tell us like about these career pivots that you've had and like what brought you to Chief ultimately.
Yeah, thank you. Chief, it was one of those unbelievable moments for me where, I had stepped off the ladder, former CMO at Paramount, and feeling like I wanted to get back to something that felt more purpose driven. And when I thought about what that was for me, it was the development of talent, it was the people. And so I decided while I was still in seat to get my executive coaching certification. And when I left Paramount, I was exploring that for myself, looking at building a coaching and consulting business focused on leadership development in this era that we're in. And then the chief opportunity opened up. And it was this ability to bring these two things that I cared really deeply about together in the role of Chief Marketing Officer at Chief.
Yeah, yeah. And for our listeners that aren't familiar with Chief, Chief helps address the systemic problem of the unfair lack of leadership, women's representation rather in leadership, Sabrina. But I know over the years, Chief has grown and has a bunch of members, a bunch of content, a bunch of research. So we can dig into that more. But maybe just tell us kind of the basics of the Chief model.
Yeah, sure. So, um, when you think about Chief, we are the largest network for senior female leaders in the country. And the goal, Chief was came online in 2019, and the goal then and the sort of focus was the senior executive woman, the woman inside corporate, and creating peer communities where there was support. So our kind of flagship product of Core, guided, facilitated by some of the best executive coaches in the business, but really peer led, and the ability to bring peers together to
Mhm.
have the conversations that were so hard to have inside our org charts. Um, you know, when I joined in 2025, there's this real moment to think about how female leadership, particularly how corporate female leadership has evolved since 2019, and how the needs of, our um, our members had really changed and how we were going to change alongside it. And so we did a piece of research then called the Dear Ladder Survey that went and explored female ambition. There were a lot of narratives out in the world about how women are no longer as ambitious as they used to
Mhm.
be. And what we found is that's bullshit. Women are still as ambitious as ever, but the kind of tenure of that ambition had evolved and the needs of women had evolved, and a lot of that driven by some of the systemic things that were happening. And so more and more women were creating their own paths outside of the companies that they had been in, or more and more women have were in transition and needing a different level of support than they used to. And the ones who were still leading inside the C-suite and inside corporate had less and less resources than they had in the beginning, and so that the kind of systems of support that were necessary and what our members were asking for of Chief had really evolved to be more of a multi-hyphenate kind of mindset.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I interviewed Rachel Thomas, the co-founder of Lean In, with the new Women in the Workplace report. And
Yep.
that was like right before it came out. And then when it came out, the biggest flack and backlash was about that ambition gap. And much to everything that Chief found, like it's a systems problem. It's not an individual problem. There's nothing inherently biologically different about women or be less ambitious. We're responding to the environment
Yeah.
around us that's saying, hey, you don't have as much resources, support. You have a lot of times, a lot more of the caregiving and other responsibilities as assigned. I think about Sabrina, just the mental load that women carry. Like that's one of my friends calls it capacity erosion. It's just constantly more and more things at work, at home, in life. And to your point, this like lack of overall support, like the scaffolding that we've had, has eroded, and people aren't calling attention to it. And I'm curious about that. Like, what will it take for people to like genuinely care about this and companies to invest in this?
Well, we are seeing, a lot of companies continuing to invest in talent at the highest levels, and I think there is now an acknowledgement that, and I think part of the research that we had put out and part of the feedback we heard from certainly from senior women chief members and non-chief members is that the ambition still exists. What's different is it's autonomy and influence and flexibility. Like it's more control over how that ambition is going to show up every day because to your point, we are holding many roles, right? And we need the ability to show up for our kids when we need to show up, and show up for, our teams when we have to do that. And that's a constant juggling of priorities. And that, I think when we invest in our talent, in their ability and their autonomy to make, particularly at this level, right, to make
Mhm.
those decisions, to provide that flexibility while still delivering at the highest level, we see that return, pay off in spades and people staying in the roles and being able to deliver the outcomes, right, that businesses want.
Mhm. Yeah. Autonomy is a huge driver of employee motivation. It's been well researched, well studied, and not just for women, but, you know, because of the unique responsibilities that women often are overtasked with, that autonomy factor is so much more important because just because I can't be on my lap, in the office, button seat at 8 a.m. doesn't mean that I can't design my workday in a way that works for me and get my work done when I'm trusted in an autonomous way. And
Yep.
so I usually hear the two pushbacks I hear when senior leaders are being honest about their lack of support. They usually say, paid leave is like too expensive, right? They're not seeing the ROI of that. They go right to the cost and not like, we know the longevity, the turnover savings, like the onboarding costs. Like there's so many costs associated with losing a valuable employee that we're not capturing.
Yep.
And they go straight to like the perceived cost of the paid leave where you're not getting that the productivity, which we could argue you recover within that first year of the person returning successfully to work. So that's one. I'm curious in your thoughts on that. And then this other idea about like go right to flexibility. Oh, women need more flexibility. Like it's not fair because if we do this for her, then we have to do it for everyone. And then somehow everyone will become non-productive or lazy or fill in the blank attribute. And so I'm just curious, like I'm sure you've heard those things before. I always struggle with like how to respond. Other than like, here's a study.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, I think we know, to your point, the cost of replacing talent, and that cost is always higher than the cost to retain them, to invest in them, to have the structures and support. For me, I think a lot about coaching. So there was a moment um, at Paramount where I was in a deep state of burnout. And I
Mhm.
was so deep in that burnout that I didn't even have the language to name it. And so, um, the Paramount invested in me by providing an executive coach who I had the wonderful luck of having an incredible transformative experience with. And it started by getting to the ability to name the state
Yeah.
and to really get to the reasons for that, right? And some of those were, the lack of boundaries, the getting far away from the things that I really valued, like the development of people because of the state of the business and things like that. And then some of this is where I, also learned one of the key things, key mistakes I was making as a sort of high achieving, high output female executive is I didn't build enough rest in for myself. And like very, very in the simplest of terms, in building space into my calendar every single day proactively to
Mhm.
ensure that I was taking time to stop, take a deep breath, take a walk, and do the big reset. And part of this is a nervous system reset. Part of it is a like thought reset to be able to make sure that I was actually showing up then in the way that the organization needed me to, and then creating enough. And we know about, the ability to create um, thinking time so that I could do the real strategic work that was necessary for the time and the moment that we were in. And that learning I took, it will continue on with me forever. And so I answer that by saying we forget as leaders that actually that rest, that restorative time, that time out that sometimes
Mhm.
our employees need is when a lot of times the best, bigger, more kind of white space type ideas come back and come back in because we need to step away in order to be able to have the freedom to do the work that, we're expected to do at this level.
Yeah, yeah, and there's so much, again, research data on this. I read a book like Why We Sleep, and
Yes.
if you don't rest, like 7 hours, people, unless you're a superhuman and very biologically different than most of us, you need the 7 hours. We all do, and you can't catch up on the weekends. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
But what was fascinating to me is about prioritizing sleep, which I kind of always have. Like I'm a sleeper. I like to go to bed early. I'm a grandma, but the more the second half of the sleep schedule. So like when you get up really early in the morning, like a lot of corporate leaders do, like early riser, right? Get the email box tackled before everyone starts, get to the office before all the meetings. Like that's when your REM sleep is, like your rapid eye movement sleep, which helps with emotional regulation.
Yep.
'Cause it's when you dream, it's like therapy. And then also with memory, like you can't, they've done studies, if you don't get the enough REM sleep, you don't remember things. So to your point, Sabrina, like not just like space during the day, like space between things for sure, but like real rest at night. Like we need that. And again, it's kind of this like, I feel like this conversation is like the short-term investment for the long-term gain. Like invest in this rest, and then you get better ideas, like more innovation, like all the solving problems more holistically. Because if you're sleep deprived and running from meeting to meeting, you are not equipped to solve problems and be innovative as much as you could with a full night's
Yes.
rest and some space.
Yes. And I'm right there with you. And in my coaching work, I was doing kind of my own investigation and the connection between neuroscience. And so I wrote a great book called
Yeah.
Neuroscience for Leadership. And a lot of that is about how we, there's the brain science that underpins all of this, right? Does say exactly that. Like we need to allow for that time.
Mm.
That's the same thing, whether that's PTO or paid leave.
Mhm.
Like when we provide the space for employees to maximize their life, not just their work. They come back with a renewed energy to the roles that they're in every day.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw that as a leader in my own business. That was something we tried the 4-day work week, and at first I was like, oh boy, like we'll see, right? Like big experiment. If this doesn't work, it's not gonna work. I felt like a corporate type there. But again, like the research shows us, and I had the same experience of we got just as much done, if not more, and people came back much more joyful Monday morning.
Yeah.
And it didn't compromise the quality or productivity of the team. But when you're in the burnout, and Sabrina, that's a great example of like you had the ability to have an executive coach to like help you zoom out and recognize you're in the burnout because I feel like people don't even know where they're at right now. There's so much chaos, uncertainty, the world is weird, and you're bringing all that to the workday and just kind of like schlucking through it. And I just don't think people can like zoom out. So I'm just curious, like, what helped you in that process to like zoom out and recognize, like, whoa, I am super burnout.
Yeah, it's interesting because, it's this when you start to diagnose, right, start at the very tactical level in a coaching engagement, in, architecting what you want to achieve, right, from the sessions, and then, trying to diagnose what's getting in the way of achieving the goals that you've put on the table. And that's where the real sort of insights started to happen. Like, why? What is this sort of cycle that I've put myself on, that is sort of causing this feeling for me? And what are those, both the sort of physical structures of like the day to day? I'm a mom of three, and, big job, big calendar, overscheduled, over meetinged, right? Boundary challenges, all of those things. And then the sort of the deeper things about, am I doing work every day that I'm finding meaning
Yeah.
in, right? And those two things together, um, and what is that work that
Mhm.
where is the joy in the work that I'm doing every day, and how do I make sure that I'm always leading from that place of joy, and from the place of opportunity, right? And that opportunity framing. And then where's the community? And I think one of the things I was lacking actually in some of my previous roles was that community, because to your point, we are living through um, really strange times. And as a leader, you're holding a lot. You're holding, and as a mother and parent, right? And all these different identities, and you're coming at, everything that's happening in the world through all of these different lenses. And um, it's hard when you don't have a peer set to have that conversation. And, that's the beauty of Chief for me. It's what I feel every time I walk into one of these rooms today. We have an opportunity to have conversations with folks who are, maybe their roles that they're holding don't look exactly the same, but they have the same kind of I think, texture, and having to look at them through both a leadership lens as well as like a human lens, um, and think about how you both, show up and optimize, the output for the business you're in, but also for the people that you're leading. And
Yeah.
in some ways, in some levels, for like what you want the future, right, of the world to look like for, the next generation.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's one of the joys of being a woman is the power we have of like our community building skills. And you get a group of powerful women together like Chief, and it's like very energizing. Like we could solve a lot more of the world's problems if we were trusted to do so. But
Exactly right.
having that space, I mean, I think what I'm taking away from this conversation is thinking about if you are in this rut or, perhaps if you think you might be in kind of a burnout zone or, maybe just not fully optimal zone, I think all of us could use an adjustment from time to time. Like zoom out, think about meaning and purpose in your work. Think about community and where you have community and maybe where you don't or where you need some additional community. Know that you're not alone. Like this feeling is sadly all too common. I know I have to check myself time to time. I'm feeling that really feeling like that capacity erosion is slipping underneath me, is juggling so many different things right now. And so it can happen to all of us, and we can get it figured out. We can slip back into it, but you're not alone. I love Sabrina that Chief has. on a podcast, research, like all the things. I know you've grown over the years. So tell our listeners more about all the resources y'all have and how to connect and follow Chief's work.
Yeah, thank you. I think the last thing I'd say is we are at a very transformative time for the future of work. This is one of those moments. AI is not only a technology that is moving at pace, that is going to change the way in which we do our jobs, our functional jobs, right? Not just as leaders, but all the way down. But it's also going to fundamentally change the structures of our organizations. And I think this is, for me, an opportunity for the power of the network. So as I've been grappling with these issues inside Chief, right, as the chief marketing officer, the places in which I've learned the most is from other chief marketing and growth officers who are also grappling with these things in real time. And so I think we're going to see, real fundamental shifts in the frame of how leadership is defined in the next era as we think about leading the superhuman organization. And so this is something that's really like is keeping me up at night, and I'm thinking a lot about, and Chief's thinking a lot about because a lot of our chief women are talking to us about it. And so we just released, hot off the presses, released a study around women in the age of AI and really how women are leading through this era, but they're doing it with intentionality. And so we're putting intentional leadership first over the speed of deployment. So you can find that study at chief.com/AI. And if you are interested in learning more about Chief or applying, you can do that at chief.com/apply.
That's awesome. Yeah, I just read that study. 80% of women are involved in leading AI efforts. Like just all these like numbers you hear, like, oh, women aren't engaged because they're not leading all these AI companies. Well, like, guess what? Like every industry is male dominated, right? That's the need for chief. But it's not true that women aren't involved in AI. And so I really like that you dispelled that myth. And listeners, check out, it's a great newsletter too. I'll just plug your newsletter. It's
Thank you.
always a great article, new research, books to read, executive coaching support and help. And the podcast has been wonderful over the years as well. So really admire y'all's work, Sabrina, and thanks for sharing your story with us today.
Same to you, Julie. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.